Hello and welcome to this video on bushwhacking, riding off the beaten path. The term bushwhacking refers to riding in a direction that may not be as common as people think, and we'll discuss that during this video. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to tell you a little story. There was a show that I watched growing up called MASH, and the character of Hawkeye, who was a doctor at this outfit, was treating a soldier, and they were talking about where they had grown up. The soldier described his hometown, and Hawkeye said, "Oh, yes. So, and then there's that restaurant on the edge of town that sells the greasiest fries." And the soldier's like, "Yeah." And Hawkeye said, "And then there's that rundown movie theater, which seems to always have the creaky seats that made a lot of noise during the movies." And the soldier says, "Yes." And he has several comments like this. And the soldier says, "I didn't know that you grew up in my hometown." And Hawkeye responds saying, "I didn't. I grew up in that same town in a different state." Meaning that there is these commonalities that we often see in hometowns or stories that are kind of universal and not really that surprising. I've always loved that scene. So the well-worn path when it comes to story writing is following the set pattern for a lot of stories. A lot of stories have the same shape, where we're going to start from point A and go to point B and follow the general beats and plot points that get you from one point to the other. The concept of bushwhacking is, instead of going down this well-worn path, is to then go whoop off into the jungle, as it were, or off into the forest. Take off the well-worn path and see where it leads us. Now, I actually did that with my very first book unintentionally. Well, actually it was intentional, but I'll talk about it. My very first book, I had not written really with the intention of having it be published, but wrote it called The Hidden Sun. And I have 4 daughters, and I wrote this when they were younger. It's a story about a castle and princess and royal guardians and all sorts of stories like that. And it started off very typical with the princess and her personal guardian, who's not allowed to marry. They kind of fall in love. And about chapter 8, the princess dies from an accident, and the royal guardian is banned from the castle. The story goes off the beaten path at that point in time. And it was done on purpose because, number one, I wanted to establish that the stakes were very real in this story, and that the good guys weren't always going to get out of the bad situations that they were put in, which increased the stakes for the rest of the book. The first responses that I got when people started reading this were people got very upset because they had really grown to like the character of the princess. And when she died, I had several people, actually quite a few people, get mad at me and say I stopped reading the book at that point in time for a little bit because I was so mad at you that you were doing something that I didn't expect. But then I picked up the book and finished reading it, and all is forgiven because I understand why you did what you did. I did bushwhacking. I went off the beaten path, and it frustrated, but also engaged the reader because it was not what they expected. Now, this is different from Deus Ex Machina, and I did my best to pronounce that. This is the concept where something saves the day that is unexpected. It is actually considered very lazy story writing, where you have, let's say, the hero who's backed up against the corner, all hope is lost, and all of a sudden he realizes he has the ability to blow up people with his mind without any sort of foreshadowing, without any sort of setup that this may be a skill that he may possess. It's just this random event that saves the day. This is actually quite common. One of the more famous examples of this is in the movie Jurassic Park, at the very end, where the heroes are about to be attacked by the raptors, and at the very last second, in comes a T-Rex to grab not the good guys, but the raptor. So why does the T-Rex grab the raptor and not the humans? Don't know why. Why did the T-Rex show up at that exact moment? Don't know why. He came to save the day out of nowhere. Okay? That is not bushwhacking. That is lazy riding. No. So, some final thoughts on this. When you go bushwhacking, you may find two things happen. Number one, you may find you get to the top of a mountain and you have no idea how to get down. Well, you may need to back it up a little bit and figure out a way to get down, or at least build in some foreshadowing or some other ideas earlier in the book that the person knows how to get down. Also, you may climb to heights that you hadn't really thought of before, and you can see the story from a bigger scope, which is better and more interesting than if you were to stay on the well-worn path. So those are my thoughts on bushwhacking.